The monitoring screens painted Commander Vexhari's face in shades of electric blue. 12 years. 12 long years of watching the same chaotic planet spin through the void, broadcasting its noise into the cosmic silence like a child shouting in a library. Earth, Sol 3. The humans. Always talking, always fighting, always so magnificently predictably loud. Vexhari's elongated fingers moved across the control panel with practiced efficiency, his third eyelid sliding closed against the brightness of 1,000 data streams. Behind him, the vast observation deck of monitoring station Theta 7 hummed with the quiet purpose of advanced technology doing what it did best, watching, recording, analyzing species too primitive to know they were being observed. Another busy cycle from our noisy neighbor's commander. Tech Officer Mordain approached from the communications array, his youth evident in the way his cranial ridges still held their deep purple coloration. The young officer had been assigned to Theta 7 only 6 months ago, fresh from the Zithian Academy, still finding wonder in the routine surveillance of a developing civilization. Vexhari allowed himself the smallest hint of what humans might call a smile. They never stopped, Mordain. Yesterday we intercepted over 3 million separate transmissions. Music, entertainment broadcasts, military communications, civilian chatter. They broadcast everything. Why do they waste so much energy on communication? Mordain studied the cascading data with genuine curiosity. Most developing species remain quiet until they achieve interstellar capability. Humans are different. Vexhari pulled up a historical file, watching radio waves ripple outward from Earth like stones dropped in a cosmic pond. They discovered electromagnetic transmission for atomic energy. They've been shouting into the void for over 2 centuries, announcing their presence to anyone listening. Remarkable, really. Most species learn caution first. Humans seem to learn it last, if at all. The Galactic Concordat had established monitoring protocols 40 years ago, when human technology first crossed the threshold of detection. Standard procedure for any species showing signs of potential spacefaring capability. Watch, record, wait. Intervene only if they posed a threat to themselves or others. So far, humans qualified on both counts, but remain safely confined to their own planet and its immediate moon. Primitive, divided, loud, harmless. The assessment had remained unchanged for 4 decades. Mordain returned to his station and Vexhari turned back to his screens. Another day, another cycle. The signal strength indicator dropped. Vexhari's primary hand froze mid-gesture. The number representing electromagnetic emissions from Earth's largest continental mass had decreased by 30% in the last hour. That's odd, he muttered. Sir Mordain looked up. Run a diagnostic on the North American sensor array. I'm showing a significant drop in transmission volume from Region Alpha. The young officer's fingers danced across his console. Long seconds passed. When Mordain spoke again, his voice carried the careful neutrality of someone reporting data they didn't quite believe. No malfunction detected, Commander. The decrease is real, and it's accelerating. Vexhari felt something cold settle in his thorax. In 12 years of monitoring, he had never seen human communication levels drop without explanation. Wars increased chatter. Natural disasters increased distress signals. Technical failures were localized and temporary. This was neither localized nor temporary. Expand the analysis. All regions, full spectrum. The wait felt longer than it was. When the results materialized on the main display, both Zithians stared in silence. Every human population center showed the same pattern. Communication levels dropping rapidly. Not gradually as technology failed, not chaotically as disaster struck, but systematically, deliberately, as if someone had given an order and 8 billion humans had simply stopped talking. Alert Duty Officer Kalara, Vexhari said quietly. Tell her we have a situation that requires immediate attention. Within the hour, the Situation Room had transformed from routine observation post to crisis center. Duty Officer Kilara stood before the primary display, her senior status evident in the silver threading through her cranial ridges. She had studied xenocultural development for 30 years and advised the Concordat Council on First Contact protocols and read more classified reports on emerging civilizations than most beings knew existed. She had never seen anything like this. Show me the timeline, she commanded. Vexhari brought up the data. A graph showing human electromagnetic output over the past 24 hours. For 40 years, it had been a relatively steady line with minor fluctuations. Then 6 hours ago, it had begun to fall. Not crashed, fallen, like water draining from a tub, steady and inexorable. No distress signals, Kilara asked. None. No emergency broadcasts, no evacuation orders, no calls for help. Natural disaster asteroid impact solar event. Dr. Zener, the station's senior xenobiologist, stepped forward. The elderly scientist had monitored biological signatures from developing worlds for longer than Vexhari had been alive. Our deep space sensors detect no unusual radiation signatures from Sol 3, no explosive events, no atmospheric disturbances. The planet's electromagnetic field remains stable. Weather patterns are unchanged. By every metric we can measure, Earth appears completely normal. Except for the silence, Mordain added quietly. Kilara turned to face the young officer. Explain. The silence is too perfect, ma'am. When civilizations collapse, communication usually continues in fragments for days or even weeks. Automated systems keep broadcasting. Emergency networks stay active. Someone somewhere tries to call for help. But the humans stopped everything simultaneously. Every transmission, every signal, all within the same 6-hour window. Kilara studied the young officer with new respect. He was right, of course. The simultaneous nature of the silence suggested coordination, not catastrophe. Are you suggesting this was planned? She asked carefully. I'm suggesting it wasn't an accident, ma'am. The implications hung in the air like a physical weight. A civilization didn't simply go silent without reason. And a primitive civilization certainly didn't coordinate a complete communications blackout across an entire planet with military precision. Commander Vexhari, Kilara said, her voice carrying the weight of a decision that would echo through history, prepare an emergency report for the Science Council. Include all data, all analysis, and all speculation. I want this transmitted on priority channels within the hour. Yes, ma'am. What conclusion should I include? Kilara looked at the dark screens, the absence where noise had been. Conclude that after 40 years of observation, we may have fundamentally misunderstood what we were observing. As the report was prepared and transmitted, as monitoring stations throughout the galaxy confirmed the same impossible silence, none of them could have imagined they were witnessing the first phase of the most sophisticated strategic deception in galactic history. The humans had not vanished. They had simply stopped pretending. 72 hours earlier, in a facility that existed in no official records buried beneath 300 meters of Montana granite, Dr. Alara Thorne had made the hardest decision of her life. The command center was small by military standards, designed for efficiency rather than grandeur. 6 stations arranged in a semicircle, each monitoring different aspects of what the official records called the Human Colonial Defense Initiative and what Alara privately thought of as humanity's insurance policy against cosmic indifference. The main display showed a planet, not Earth, Kepler 442b world, 400 light-years distant, where 40,000 human colonists had built farms and laboratories and homes under an alien sun. Had built them. Past tense. The attack had lasted 6 hours. The recording lasted 4 minutes. Alara had watched it 17 times now, and each viewing carved deeper lines into her face. Raider ships dropping from orbit. Civilian transports burning. The desperate final transmission from the colony administrator voice breaking as he reported that no help was coming, that the Concordat had voted that Article 12 of the Mutual Defense Charter had failed by a single vote, that 40,000 humans were about to die, and the galaxy had decided not to care. The transmission ended in static and fire. Alara's hands had stopped shaking after the 7th viewing. By the 17th, they were perfectly steady as she reached for the communication panel. Get me Ambassador Sterling. The holographic projection materialized within seconds. Thaddeus Sterling appeared sitting in what looked like a garden afternoon sunlight, painting his silver hair gold. Retired for 5 years now, he still maintained the ramrod posture of a man who had spent 40 years in military service before discovering he had a gift for the subtler warfare of diplomacy. Alara. His voice carried the weight of someone who already knew why she was calling. I've seen the reports. All 40,000 Thaddeus, dead, while the Concordat debated procedures and protocols and whether a colony 400 light-years from Earth technically qualified for mutual defense under subsection 7 paragraph 4. The vote was close. The vote was meaningless. Alara's voice remained flat, emotionless. She had burned through grief somewhere around the 9th viewing. What remained was something colder and infinitely more dangerous. One of those 40,000 was Miranda Halstead, your niece, my protege, the geneticist who was going to revolutionize our understanding of adaptive biology. 29 years old, Thaddeus. She had 29 years. Sterling's face remained still, but something flickered in his eyes. Pain quickly controlled. I know. The Concordat's response was to express deep regret and open an investigation into whether the raiders violated any treaty protocols. No mention of justice, no mention of response. Deep regret in an investigation. That's their way, Alara, you know that. It's why we built what we built. Alara stood pacing the small space between her command station and the main display. 18 years old when her parents had died, 40 years of waiting, planning, building. 58 years old now, and the galaxy still saw humanity as a species barely worth noticing. They think we're primitive, she said quietly. Loud, chaotic, constantly fighting amongst ourselves. They've been watching us for 40 years, and they see exactly what we've shown them. A species barely capable of reaching its own moon, let alone the stars. That was the plan. The plan was to buy time, to appear weak while we became strong, to let them underestimate us while we built what they couldn't imagine we were capable of building. Sterling leaned forward, his image flickering slightly with the quantum fluctuations of communication across vast distance. Alara, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, 100 years, Thaddeus. 3 generations of humans have lived double lives. 8 billion on Earth playing the role of primitive civilization maintaining the illusion. 20 billion more spread across 3,000 worlds building in secret. Every mining operation a cover for military construction. Every educational space program actually training fleet officers. Every historical museum actually manufacturing next-generation weapons systems. I know what we've built, Alara. I helped design half of it. Then you know we're ready? We've been ready for 10 years. We stayed hidden because you taught me patience. You taught me that the longer we waited, the stronger we'd be when we finally revealed ourselves. And I stand by that teaching. 40,000 people, Thaddeus. Miranda was 29 years old, your niece. The silence stretched between them, measured in light years and loss. Finally, Sterling spoke, his voice carrying the weight of a man choosing between competing values he held equally dear. Your parents, he said quietly, 40 years ago. The Concordat observation team that mistook a colony transport for a military vessel. 3,000 dead, including your mother and father. You were 18. The official report called it a regrettable accident, classified it as acceptable losses due to primitive species' unpredictable behavior. Alara's jaw tightened. I remember. You were 18, brilliant, angry, burning with a need to make sure it never happened again. I saw that fire in you, and I taught you to bank it, to let it burn slow and hot instead of fast and bright. I taught you that revenge executed in haste is just another form of suicide. This isn't revenge, isn't it? This is survival, Thaddeus. This is showing the galaxy that humanity will not be ignored, will not be dismissed, will not watch our people die while others debate protocols. We built this for a reason. The question is whether we have the courage to use it. And Sterling was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note Alara had heard only twice before, once when he'd agreed to come out of retirement to mentor her, and once when he'd voted to approve the final phase of Project Silent Ascension. It was the sound of a man recognizing an inevitable tide and choosing to swim with it rather than drown fighting against it. Phase 1, he said, full evacuation protocol, 72 hours. You're certain? No. But I'm certain that if we wait for certainty, we'll wait forever. And I'm certain that Miranda Halstead deserved better than deep regret in an investigation. My niece deserved justice. Alara felt something loosen in her chest. She had been prepared to give the order alone if necessary to bear the full weight of a decision that would change human history. Having Sterling's support didn't make the decision easier, but it made the weight more bearable. Protocol Fenrir, she said, speaking the code phrase that had existed in contingency plans for 20 years, but had never been activated. All stations, all colonies, all sleeper assets. The facade ends in 72 hours. The galaxy won't know what hit it. That's the idea. Sterling's hologram flickered, preparing to disconnect. Before it did, he spoke one more time. Alara, your parents would be proud of what you've built, but they would want you to remember something. What's that? We're revealing our strength, not abandoning our humanity. Don't forget the difference. The hologram dissolved, leaving Alara alone with her screens and her decision. She pulled up a secondary display, watching data streams flow in from 3,000 worlds. Within minutes, the confirmation codes began arriving. Every colony, every installation, every carefully hidden military asset scattered across 500 light-years of space. All acknowledged, all ready, all waiting for her final word. Her fingers hovered over the transmission key. One press and 8 billion humans would begin the most precisely choreographed evacuation in history. One press and the lie humanity had maintained for a century would end. One press, and the galaxy would learn that the primitive, noisy species they'd been monitoring had actually been playing them for fools. She pressed the key. All stations, this is Colonial Defense Command. Protocol Fenrir is active. Phase 1 begins now. Timeline 72 hours. Final evacuation window closes at Mark 000. All personnel will follow extraction procedures as rehearsed. All civilians will be notified through established channels. All systems will go dark on schedule. A pause. Then quieter, a personal message that would be heard by every human in the solar system. For 40 years, we've pretended to be what they expected. Primitive, divided, harmless. We did this not out of fear, but out of patience. Not out of weakness, but out of strategic necessity. Today, the pretense ends. Today, we begin showing the galaxy who we really are and what we're really capable of achieving. Another pause. She thought of her parents blown to atoms by a Concordat observation team that had mistaken curiosity for threat. She thought of Miranda Halstead burning on a colony world while the galaxy debated procedures. Make no mistake, this is not an evacuation born of fear. This is a strategic repositioning. We're not running from Earth. We're simply no longer pretending that Earth is all we have. Phase 1, go dark. Show them silence. Let them wonder. Let them worry. And when they've had time to imagine every possible disaster, every nightmare scenario, every worst-case possibility, Ilara smiled cold and precise. Then we show them the truth. Across Earth, the machinery of deception began its final operation. In New York, families locked their homes for the last time, every dish washed, every bed made, every possession arranged with careful precision. In Mumbai, power plants began automated shutdown sequences that would maintain basic functions but eliminate the constant electromagnetic chatter that had marked human civilization for 2 centuries. In Sao Paulo, the last commercial aircraft landed their transponders going silent in perfect coordination. In 72 hours, Earth would appear empty, abandoned, a mystery for the Concordat to puzzle over. But 8 billion humans weren't abandoning Earth. They were going home. To the real home the Concordat had never imagined existed. The stealth transports began arriving on the second day, landing in remote locations across every continent. They looked like the primitive cargo haulers the Concordat had observed for decades, but appearances, as humanity had proven, were magnificently deceiving. Each transport could carry 5,000 people in cryostasis. Each transport was equipped with quantum drives that bent space in ways the Concordat's best scientists considered theoretically impossible. Each transport would make the journey to the nearest colony world in 3 days, rather than the 40 years conventional physics suggested it should take. The Concordat had been observing Earth for 4 decades and had never detected a single one of them. They had been watching the house, never imagining that humanity had built a city underground. Ilara stood in the command center watching the evacuation proceed with mechanical efficiency. Every family had practiced this drill 100 times. Every city had coordination protocols refined over decades. What the Concordat saw as chaotic humans barely capable of organizing a municipal government was actually a species that had learned to coordinate 8 billion people across a planet in complete silence. The irony was almost beautiful. Commander Thorne, the communications officer, a young woman named Lieutenant Reese, turned from her station. We're receiving final confirmations from the Continental Coordination Centers. North America 97% evacuated. Europe 95%. Asia 98%. Africa 96%, South America 94%, Australia 99%. Stragglers, all accounted for. Final transports will depart in 6 hours. You're scheduled on the last flight from North America, ma'am. I'll be on it, but not yet, not while there was still work to do. Ilara pulled up the communication logs, watching the systematic shutdown of human electromagnetic output, radio stations going silent, television broadcasts ending mid-program, military communications shutting down with precision timing, cell towers powering down in carefully orchestrated sequences. To anyone monitoring from space, it would look like civilization experiencing catastrophic failure. All the communication infrastructure going dark simultaneously, as if some plague or disaster had swept across the planet with impossible speed. Let them think disaster. Let them imagine catastrophe. Let them send their investigation teams to an empty world and find nothing but pristine homes and working infrastructure and the maddening absence of any explanation. The third day arrived with the quiet certainty of a plan executed perfectly. Ilara walked through the command center one final time, checking each station, ensuring every system was set for automated operation. The lights would stay on, the water would keep running, the power grid would maintain itself. Everything would work perfectly. except for the 8 billion humans who wouldn't be there to use any of it. Ambassador Sterling's hologram appeared one final time as Alara prepared to leave. He stood in the same garden, but the light had changed. Evening now, shadows growing long. All colonies report ready, he said. 20 billion humans holding their breath, waiting to see if a century of planning actually works. It'll work. You sound confident. I am confident. We've run the simulations 1,000 times. Every variable accounted for. Every contingency planned. Except the human ones. You can't simulate how the Concordat will actually react when they discover what we've done. Alara picked up her command tablet, the physical symbol of authority she'd carried for 18 years. You taught me that humans are uniquely good at one thing, Thaddeus. Adaptation. We thrive in chaos because we learn to create order from it. The Concordat has had 40,000 years of stable civilization. They've forgotten how to deal with genuine surprise. And you're about to surprise them comprehensively. That's the plan. Sterling's expression softened slightly. Your parents would be proud, Alara. And terrified, but mostly proud. I hope so, because if this goes wrong, then we'll have revealed ourselves prematurely and given the galaxy a perfect target. I know. We all know, but staying hidden forever wasn't an option. Not after Kepler 442b. Not after they proved they'll let humans die rather than inconvenience themselves with our protection. Alara nodded slowly. 40,000 dead. The Concordat expressed deep regret. You know what I want to express? I'm afraid to ask. Absolute certainty. I want them to look at humanity and know with perfect clarity that we will never again be victims. That we will never again wait for their protection or their permission. That we are not the primitive species they thought they were watching. Then go, Sterling said quietly. Go show them what we've become. The transport waited on the tarmac of what had once been Malmstrom Air Force Base. Sleek, dark, humming with barely contained power. The last 100 humans in North America boarded in silence, each carrying a small bag of personal items and a much larger burden of history. Alara was the last to board. She paused at the ramp looking back at the Montana landscape. Somewhere beneath these mountains, her command center would continue operating on automated protocols, maintaining Earth's basic infrastructure, while broadcasting nothing into space but eerie, perfect silence. She thought of the Concordat monitors who would notice that silence. Thought of their confusion, their investigations, their theories. Thought of Captain Sereneth, who would eventually come to Earth and find pristine homes and working systems, and no explanation for where 8 billion humans had gone. Good. Let them wonder. Let them investigate. Let them spend a year trying to solve the mystery. Because when they finally got their answer, it would be delivered not as an explanation, but as a declaration. Alara climbed aboard. The ramp sealed behind her. The transport's quantum drives hummed to life, bending space and physics and probability. Through the viewport, Earth fell away rapidly, shrinking from planet to marble to memory. But not goodbye. Never goodbye. Just repositioning. The journey to the nearest colony world would take 3 days. Alara spent the first day in her cabin reviewing final preparations for Phase 2. The second day, she walked among the cryo-sleep pods, looking at the faces of humans who had lived their entire lives maintaining the greatest deception in history. On the third day, she stood on the bridge as the colony world came into view. New Britannia, the humans called it, though no Concordat survey had ever detected its existence. A terrestrial world orbiting a G-type star, terraformed over 80 years, home to 3 million humans living lives the Concordat had never imagined existed. The transport descended through atmosphere, and Alara got her first look at what humanity had built in secret. Cities that rivaled anything on Earth. Spaceports busy with traffic the Concordat had never detected. Orbital platforms bristling with defensive systems the Concordat's threat assessments had never imagined humans possessing. And ships. Thousands upon thousands of ships. Sleek vessels that bore the aesthetic of human design but the capability of something far beyond what Earth's primitive technology should have produced. The transport landed at the Capitol complex, and Alara emerged into sunlight that wasn't Sol's. The air smelled different. The gravity felt lighter. The sky showed stars even in daytime constellations no human had seen from Earth. But the people were human, Earth human, speaking English and Mandarin and Spanish and Hindi and 100 other languages. Wearing clothes that would have looked perfectly normal in New York or Mumbai or Sao Paulo. Living lives that were simultaneously completely alien and fundamentally familiar. A delegation waited at the landing platform. Military officers in uniforms that bore Earth's flag. Scientists whose research existed only in databases the Concordat had never accessed. Politicians who governed worlds the Concordat had never mapped. At the head of the delegation stood a woman in military dress uniform. Fleet Admiral Sarah Richardson, commander of what humanity called the Colonial Defense Fleet. 53 years old, born on New Britannia, who had never set foot on Earth, but spoke with an accent that could have come from any American city. Ambassador Thorne, she said formally, offering a crisp salute. Welcome home. Alara returned the salute. Admiral, status report. Phase 1 complete across all 3,000 colony worlds. 8 billion Earth residents in transit, with 99.6% now safely in colonial space. Stragglers will arrive within 48 hours. In Phase 2, the Admiral's expression shifted, revealing something that might have been anticipation or might have been carefully controlled eagerness. All fleet elements report ready. 497,000 vessels ranging from corvettes to dreadnoughts, all equipped with full stealth systems, all positioned and waiting for activation command. Concealment status. We've maintained complete stealth for the entire year of the Concordat investigation period. Their monitoring stations report nothing unusual in any system where we have assets deployed. As far as the Concordat knows, every one of our ships and stations is just empty space. Alara allowed herself a small smile. A century of preparation. 3,000 worlds colonized in secret. Nearly 500,000 warships built in facilities the Concordat had never detected. 20 billion humans living lives the galaxy's most advanced surveillance systems had completely failed to observe. And now the moment of truth. Inform all fleet commanders, Alara said quietly. Phase 2 begins in 72 hours. When the Concordat comes looking for answers about Earth's silence, we're going to give them an answer they'll never forget. Admiral Richardson's smile matched hers. It's going to be quite the shock, Ambassador. That's the idea, Admiral. We spent a century teaching them to underestimate us. Now we get to spend about 5 minutes teaching them that was a mistake. Above them, invisible to any Concordat sensors, nearly 500,000 warships waited in perfect silence. Soon that silence would end. Soon the galaxy would learn that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology or firepower or numbers. It was patience, and humanity had just run out of patience. Captain Sireneth had conducted 17 first contact missions in her 20-year career with the Concordat Exploratory Service. She had walked on worlds where the air itself was toxic poetry, negotiated with species whose concept of individuality was so fluid it made pronouns meaningless, and once spent 6 months teaching a colony of crystalline beings why murder was generally considered impolite. None of that had prepared her for Earth. The bright explorer descended through atmosphere that tasted of nitrogen and oxygen in proportions that sang of biological compatibility. Sensors showed a planet in perfect ecological balance, cities intact, infrastructure humming with automated efficiency. Every metric suggested a thriving civilization, except for the 8 billion missing people. Atmospheric composition normal, reported Dr. Zenar from the science station. The xenobiologist's multifaceted eyes reflected the data streams in fragments of colored light. Oxygen levels consistent with sustained biological activity. Nitrogen balance unchanged. Particulate analysis suggests industrial activity ceased approximately 3 months ago, but environmental systems continue operating at baseline parameters. Life signs. Sireneth kept her voice neutral, professional. Inside her third heart was beating faster than the other two. Abundant. Birds, mammals, insects, marine life all within expected ranges for a Class M planet with established biosphere. But no signals matching human biological signatures. Not in this city. Not anywhere we can scan. The ship settled into Central Park with barely a whisper. Through the viewport, New York City stretched in every direction, a monument to human ambition rendered in steel and glass in absolute silence. Traffic lights continued their eternal dance of red, yellow, green, directing vehicles that would never come. Digital billboards cycled through advertisements for products no one would buy. Somewhere a flag moved in wind that carried no voices. Full environmental suits, Sireneth ordered. We don't know what happened here. Standard biohazard protocols until we confirm the absence of plague or toxins. Engineer Tokron, whose species had evolved in the crushing atmosphere of a gas giant moon, checked his suit seals with 4 hands simultaneously. Captain, our sensors show no biological hazards. Whatever happened here, it wasn't disease. Standard protocols, Engineer. I don't take chances with my crew's lives based on sensor readings alone. They descended the ramp into silence, so complete it felt physical. Sound existed, whined through buildings, the distant hum of electrical systems, birds calling in trees, but it was the wrong kind of sound. Background noise without the foreground of civilization. An orchestra playing while the audience had vanished between movements. Doctor Zenar knelt to examine the RAS running scanners across soil that showed recent human contact. DNA traces everywhere, skin cells, hair follicles, the biological debris of daily life. But nothing recent. 3 months old, maybe 4. As if every human on the planet simply stopped shedding biological material at exactly the same moment. People don't work that way, murmured Dr. Helora, the team's archaeologist. She had spent 40 years studying the rise and fall of civilizations across the galaxy. Even in the fastest pandemics, some survive. Even in the most complete evacuations, some remain. But this, she gestured at the empty streets, the silent buildings, the city that looked ready to wake up at any moment and resume its interrupted life. This is too perfect. They split into teams, each carrying portable sensors and enough weaponry to handle anything short of a military assault. Sireneth led her group down Fifth Avenue, walking past storefronts where mannequins modeled clothing for phantom customers. The displays were recent, she noted. Someone had changed them within the last 6 months, which meant humans had been here living normal lives right up until the moment they weren't. Takran stopped at an intersection, his scanners painting the air with invisible light. Captain, the power grid is functioning at approximately 40% capacity. That's enough to maintain basic systems, but well below the levels needed for a civilization this size. Someone deliberately reduced output. Automated systems reducing to standby mode. Negative. The reduction patterns suggest manual intervention. Someone went through the power distribution network and systematically lowered consumption while maintaining critical infrastructure. Sireneth felt her second heart skip a beat. You're saying someone prepared this city for abandonment, deliberately and carefully. That's exactly what I'm saying. They found the first home an hour later. A brownstone in the Upper West Side door unlocked, interior immaculate. Dr. Helora moved through the rooms with the careful reverence of someone who understood she was walking through frozen time. Look at this, she called from what appeared to be a living space. Furniture arranged, books on shelves alphabetized, kitchen cleaned, no dishes in the sink, no food left to rot. Beds made with hospital corners. This wasn't evacuation. This was preparation. In a child's bedroom, Sireneth found a note written in careful handwriting on paper that still smelled faintly of ink. The human language translated easily through her neural interface. To whoever finds this, we're not running away. We're going home. The real home you never knew existed. She read it 3 times, each word hitting like a physical blow. Not running, going home. A home that existed somewhere the Concordat had never detected. Captain, Takran's voice carried urgency. I found something at the communications facility. You need to see this immediately. The facility occupied what humans had called a data center room, after room of computer systems, humming with quiet purpose. But throughout the complex mounting brackets stood empty. Heavy cables terminated in nothing. Cooling systems maintained temperatures for equipment that wasn't there. Takran projected a holographic schematic showing the missing components. These mounting signatures match advanced quantum processing cores. The power requirements suggest computing capability far beyond anything in our records of human technology. And these coolant systems, he paused, his expression cycling through confusion and dawning comprehension. Captain, these coolant systems are designed for equipment that generates heat signatures consistent with quantum entanglement communication arrays. The kind of technology that would allow instantaneous communication across interstellar distances. That's impossible. Quantum entanglement communication is theoretical. Even the Zithian Empire hasn't successfully implemented it. Then either our theories are wrong or the humans have been considerably more advanced than we believed. Sireneth stood in the empty facility surrounded by the ghosts of technology that shouldn't exist and felt the first real stirrings of fear. Not fear of what had happened to the humans. Fear of what the humans might have done. Get me Dr. Zenar. Tell him to expand the biological survey to include any traces of advanced technology integration. I want to know if the humans were using biological or cybernetic enhancements we didn't detect. You think they were more advanced than they appeared? I think, Sireneth said slowly, that we may have been watching a performance. And we just realized it was a performance about 3 months too late. The investigation expanded globally over the next 2 weeks. Every continent told the same story. Tokyo empty pristine power systems were running at minimal capacity. London abandoned organized, no signs of struggle. Mumbai vacated clean preparation evident in every detail. São Paulo departed maintained infrastructure humming purposefully, despite the absence of anyone to use it. Everywhere the same message in different languages. Going home. The real home. Not running. At the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, they found the most disturbing evidence yet. Takran stood on a launch pad marked with blast patterns that made his engineering background scream impossible conclusions. These thermal signatures, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, indicate engine outputs at least 10 times more powerful than anything in human records. The thrust-to-weight ratios suggest propulsion systems that violate our understanding of their technological capabilities. Dr. Zenar knelt at the pad's edge scanners, revealing molecular structures altered by heat and force. Whatever launched from here was massive, and there are 47 other pads showing similar patterns across this facility alone. How many worldwide? Preliminary surveys suggest over 300 launch sites with recent heavy activity. If each site launched vehicles of the size these signatures suggest, the calculation hung unspoken between them. Hundreds of massive spacecraft, launched in secret, carrying 8 billion humans to destinations unknown. Captain Doctor, Helora's voice crackled over the communication channel. "We found something at what the humans called the Cheyenne Mountain Complex. You need to see this now." The facility was buried under granite and reinforced with metals that suggested military purpose. Most of it had been stripped equipment removed with the same careful precision they'd seen everywhere else. But in one deep chamber, a single console remained active, its screens cycling through data in human languages and mathematical notations that spoke of sophistication far beyond primitive status. And then, as they watched, a message appeared on every screen simultaneously. Simple text, repeating in every human language, an impossibly imperfect galactic standard. Phase 1 complete, initiating Phase 2 protocols. Stand by. The message repeated for exactly 60 seconds. Then the screens went dark. The console powered down and the facility returned to silence. Sireneth stared at the dead screens, her 3 hearts now beating in perfect synchronization, which in her species indicated either perfect calm or absolute terror. She knew which one she was experiencing. "Someone recorded that message specifically for us," she said quietly. "They knew we'd come, knew we'd investigate, knew we'd find this facility. And they left us a message that tells us exactly nothing, except that whatever they did was planned, is ongoing, and has multiple phases." "Should we report to Concordat Command?" asked Tokaron. "Yes. But what exactly do we report? That 8 billion humans vanished in what appears to be a carefully organized evacuation to destinations unknown, using technology we didn't know they possessed for purposes we can't even guess at, and that they're kind enough to tell us they're executing a multi-phase operation while providing zero details about what that operation actually entails." Dr. Helora touched one of the dark screens gently. "Throughout history, across 1,000 species, civilizations leave evidence when they fall. Ruins, remains, stories carved in stone for whoever comes after. But these humans, they didn't fall," Sireneth finished. "They left, and they wanted us to know it was deliberate." The report to Concordat Command took 3 days to compile and transmitted in the highest classification level available. Captain Sireneth had tried to keep it factual, but facts themselves seemed inadequate to capture the profound strangeness of an entire species vanishing with such theatrical precision. The response came within a week. Not instructions for further investigation, not requests for additional data, just a simple directive that sent cold certainty down her spine. "Maintain observation of Sol system. Do not pursue. Additional resources being allocated. Stand by for further orders." "They're scared," Tokaron said after reading the directive. "Concordat Command is actually scared." "They should be all be," replied Sireneth. "Because if the humans can hide 8 billion people in technology this advanced for this long, then what else have they been hiding?" 1,600 light-years away on a Thoraxian deep space monitoring vessel called Deep Current, Navigation Officer Keith Mull was having the worst night of his career. For the past 3 months, his sensors had been detecting energy signatures that violated every known law of physics. Massive power outputs appearing at the edges of star systems, lasting for hours, then vanishing without trace. The signatures were too organized to be natural phenomena, too powerful to be created by any known technology, and too widespread to be the work of a single civilization. They appeared in human-explored space. They appeared in Zithian territory. They appeared in regions the Concordat had marked as empty for 10,000 years. And tonight they'd appeared right next to his ship. "Captain Rexandra to the bridge. Emergency status." The captain arrived in less than a minute, her carapace still reflecting the blue-white light of her quarters. Thoraxians didn't sleep the way other species did, but they had rest cycles, and interrupting those cycles suggested crisis. "Report Keith Mull. Energy signature, Captain. 0.03 light-years from our position. Power output approximately 10 times that of a Zithian dreadnought. It appeared 4 minutes ago." "Appeared from where?" "Unknown. One moment, our sensors showed empty space. The next, we're detecting enough energy to power a small planet. Rexandra's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Any identification signals? Negative, and Captain, we're receiving a transmission. The message came in perfect galactic standard, the voice synthesized but carrying undertones of organic origin. Calm, professional, completely unthreatening in tone, but absolutely terrifying in implication. Attention Concordat vessel deep current. This area is temporarily restricted for construction activities. Please maintain current distance of no less than 0.05 light years. No hostile intent detected. Your safety is important to us. Thank you for your cooperation. The transmission ended. The energy signature continued pulsing with steady rhythm that suggested machinery of incomprehensible scale. Rexandra stared at the sensor displays. They knew our ship's name. They're monitoring us closely enough to identify us specifically, and they're polite about it. Should we investigate closer? They asked us not to, and they asked very politely, which suggests they have the capability to enforce that request less politely if necessary. You think they're human? I think that 3 months ago, an entire species went silent. 1 month ago, mysterious energy signatures started appearing across this entire region of space. Tonight, someone very politely told us to stay away from their construction site. If that's a coincidence, it's the kind of coincidence that makes me want to update my insurance policy. Keith Mole pulled up a star chart plotting every energy signature they detected over the past 3 months. The pattern was undeniable. Thousands of locations spanning hundreds of light years, all showing similar signatures, all appearing and vanishing with the regularity of scheduled operations. Captain, if these are construction sites, if someone has been building facilities on this scale in this many locations without anyone detecting them until now, then we've severely underestimated someone, Rexandra finished. Possibly the most severe underestimation in Concordat history. Over the next week, reports flooded into Concordat Command from across known space. 16 deep space vessels reported similar encounters. Polite warnings, restricted areas, automated systems preventing investigation with courtesy that was somehow more unsettling than aggression would have been. Trade routes discovered they were being monitored by invisible observers. Military communications experienced microsecond delays that suggested external scanning. Defense perimeters detected brief sensor sweeps from unidentified sources that disappeared before defensive systems could lock on. The galaxy was beginning to realize it was being watched, and the watchers were very, very good at not being seen. Dr. Velara, the Concordat's chief science advisor, compiled everything into a classified report that would change how every species viewed their place in the galaxy. We appear to be under observation, she wrote, by an unknown intelligence possessing technology significantly more advanced than our own. The intelligence demonstrates no hostile intent, but maintains perfect operational security despite our best efforts at detection. Most concerning is the coordinated nature of these activities across hundreds of light years. The ability to coordinate such widespread operations suggests capabilities that should not exist according to our understanding of physics and communication theory. She paused in her writing, considering her next words carefully. This was the conclusion that would either make her look brilliantly prescient or completely paranoid. Given the temporal correlation between these activities and the disappearance of humanity from Earth, I must conclude that we are observing human operations. The implications of this conclusion are profound. If humans possess technology this advanced, then our 40-year monitoring program completely failed to detect their true capabilities. We have been observing not a primitive civilization, but a sophisticated intelligence deliberately presenting itself as primitive. The question is no longer where the humans went. The question is what else they've been hiding and why they're choosing to reveal themselves now. She transmitted the report and sat back, feeling the weight of her species' 6,000 years of civilization pressing down on her. The Zithians had explored the galaxy when most other species were still learning to make fire. They had mapped star systems, cataloged civilizations, established the protocols that governed first contact with emerging species. And somehow the primitive humans had been playing them for fools. Aboard Deep Current, Keith Mole continued his analysis, correlating data from across the sensor network. The pattern was becoming clearer. Not random construction sites, not scattered operations, but a coherent network of installations carefully positioned, strategically distributed. Captain, he said during the daily briefing, I've overlaid our energy signature data with the historical human exploration routes we have on file. He displayed the result. Red markers showing energy signatures. Blue lines showing where human spacecraft had been detected over the past 40 years. The correlation was undeniable. 73% overlap. These facilities, or whatever they are located in regions the humans explored. Regions where our monitoring was lightest because we assumed humans didn't have the capability to establish permanent presence. Science Officer Helmara, who had been silent throughout the briefing, finally spoke. Her voice carried the weight of someone articulating a truth they wished wasn't true. We thought we were watching humans learn to reach their moon. We were actually watching them establish a colonial empire spanning hundreds of light years. We thought we were monitoring primitive spacecraft struggling to achieve orbit. We were actually observing a fraction of a fleet that was keeping most of its capability hidden. We thought we were documenting a species barely capable of radio communication. We were actually being shown exactly what they wanted us to see. While they built something we never imagined they could build, Keithmo added quietly. Chief Engineer Morgoth, a gruff Thoraxian who prided himself on practical thinking, unclouded by speculation, made a sound that might have been respect or might have been fear. For 100 years, he said, while we watched Earth and saw primitive chaos somewhere out there, humans were building this. Thousands of installations. Technology we can barely detect. Coordination across distances that shouldn't allow it. All while maintaining the illusion that they could barely reach their own moon. The question, Captain Rexandra said, is why? Why hide? Why build in secret? Why maintain the illusion of primitive status for so long? Helmara pulled up historical records, scrolling through decades of first contact protocols and integration failures. 40 years ago, a Concordat observation team misidentified a human colony transport as a military threat, destroyed it. 3,000 humans died. The incident was classified as an acceptable accident due to primitive species unpredictability. The bridge fell silent. The implication was too enormous to voice but impossible to ignore. They've been hiding, Helmara continued, because they learned that appearing primitive can be fatal. They've been building in secret because they understood that the Concordat responds to strength, not need. They maintained the illusion because it kept them safe while they became powerful enough that it wouldn't matter anymore. Powerful enough for what? Asked Morgoth. To reveal themselves, on their terms, from a position of absolute strength rather than vulnerable honesty. Rexandra stood, her carapace reflecting the bridge lights in patterns that suggested deep thought. Send priority alpha transmission to Concordat Command. Include all analysis, all correlations, all speculation. Recommended conclusion. We have severely underestimated human technological development and strategic capabilities. Further recommended, we should probably expect them to announce themselves soon. And when they do, we should be prepared for our entire understanding of galactic power dynamics to change. But you really think that they'll reveal themselves? Officer Keithmo, they've been leaving breadcrumbs for us to follow. The perfect silence on Earth, the Phase 2 message, the polite warnings from invisible installations. They're not hiding anymore. They're preparing us, getting us used to the idea that something big is coming. What could be bigger than what we've already discovered? Rexandra's expression would have been a smile in a species that smiled. If I were a species that had successfully hidden my true capabilities for a century, and I decided it was time to reveal myself, I wouldn't do it quietly. I'd do it in a way that made absolutely certain nobody ever underestimated me again. Meaning I think the humans are about to make an entrance, and I don't think it's going to be subtle. 1 year after Earth went silent, Admiral Thexvara commanded the most powerful Concordat military force assembled in peacetime. 30 dreadnoughts each capable of reducing a planet to radioactive ash. 50 cruisers, weapons platforms that could engage targets across light seconds. 200 support vessels bristling with sensors and defensive systems. All positioned at the edge of the Sol system, watching, waiting, trying to understand where 8 billion humans had disappeared to and why the galaxy was suddenly full of invisible observers who said please and thank you while preventing investigation. Admiral. The voice of her censor officer carried the careful neutrality of someone reporting data they didn't quite believe. We're detecting unusual energy signatures. Jupiter region. Thexvara had spent enough time in command to know that unusual was never good. Define unusual. Massive power outputs, multiple sources, appearing simultaneously across the entire Jupiter orbital region. Natural phenomena. Negative. The patterns are too organized. Someone is powering up large systems. Very large systems. Put it on main display. The holographic projection showed Jupiter in all its massive glory bands of colored clouds swirling in eternal storm. And around it, nothing. Empty space. The natural moons in their expected orbits. Nothing else except the sensors were screaming that empty space was anything but empty. Run a deep spectrum scan, Thexvara ordered. Maximum resolution. I want to know what's generating those power signatures. The scan took 4 minutes. 4 minutes that felt like 4 hours. When the results appeared, every officer on the bridge stopped what they were doing and stared in silence so complete it felt like the vacuum beyond the hull had leaked inside. Where their sensors had previously shown empty space structures now appeared. Massive structures, space stations each large enough to dock a Concordat dreadnought. Manufacturing facilities that dwarf the largest construction yards in Zithian space. Shipyards. Dozens of shipyards, each capable of producing vessels on a scale that shouldn't be possible. How long have those been there? Thexvara's voice came out as barely a whisper. Chief Science Officer Medane was frantically running analysis. The energy signatures suggest these installations have been operational for years, possibly decades. But our sensors show no signs of recent construction. No debris fields, no construction material. No evidence of the building process that structures this large should require. Then how did we miss them? We didn't miss them, Admiral. They were hidden. Advanced stealth technology far beyond our current capabilities. These installations were here all along. We've been scanning this region for a year. They were invisible until approximately 8 minutes ago when someone decided to power them up and let us see them. Thexvara felt something cold settle in her thorax. Someone had built this, in secret, under constant Concordat observation, and they'd hidden it so perfectly that the galaxy's most advanced sensors had detected nothing until the moment they chose to reveal themselves. Admiral, the tactical officer's voice carried an edge close to panic. Ships are emerging from those installations. Multiple ships, large vessels. The holographic display updated. From docking bays that had appeared empty moments ago, spacecraft began to emerge. Not the primitive rockets the Concordat had observed struggling to reach Earth's moon. These were warships, sleek, powerful, massive vessels that moved with the precision of advanced technology and careful training. Count, Thexvara asked. 48 vessels so far. No, 120. Admiral, they're still coming. 240, 400, 800. The emergence continued. Ships appearing from concealment, organizing into formations that demonstrated tactical knowledge and coordination far beyond anything primitive humans should possess. Each vessel bore design aesthetics that were clearly human. Something in the hull geometry, the propulsion signatures, the way they moved through space. But the sophistication was orders of magnitude beyond Concordat intelligence assessments. 12,000 vessels now, Admiral. 24,000, 48,000. Thexvara watched the numbers climb with a growing sense of unreality. This couldn't be happening. No civilization could hide a fleet this large. 96,000, 150,000, 200,000. But it was happening, right there on her displays. Nearly 250,000 ships emerging from concealment with the precision of a plan executed perfectly. Admiral, emergence is continuing. 300,000, 400,000. The tactical officer's voice had gone from panic to something like awe. Final count, he reported, his voice shaking. 497,612 vessels. The bridge fell silent. Nearly 500,000 ships, more than all Concordat military forces combined. A fleet that shouldn't exist, built in secret, hidden under stealth, so perfect it had remained undetected until this moment of deliberate revelation. That's impossible, whispered Medane. The resources alone, the manufacturing capacity, the coordination required. But it wasn't impossible. It was right there on the display. Nearly 500,000 vessels organizing into formations so complex they looked like living geometry. Moving with such perfect synchronization, it suggested communication systems that operated faster than light itself should allow. Admiral, the communications officer's voice cut through the shocked silence. We're receiving a transmission. Source: large vessel near Earth's moon. Energy signature suggests the vessel is approximately the size of a small asteroid. Put it through. The voice that filled the bridge spoke perfect galactic standard. Female, calm, carrying the absolute confidence of someone who knew they held every advantage and saw no reason to pretend otherwise. Greetings, neighbors. This is Ambassador Dr. Alara Thorne, representing the Human Colonial Administration. Thexvara exchanged glances with Medane. Human Colonial Administration. The species that supposedly couldn't colonize beyond their own moon apparently had an administration for it. The voice continued, each word precise and deliberate. Humanity appreciates the Galactic Concordat's patience during our transition period. We are pleased to announce that Earth's industrial relocation and population integration projects have been completed successfully. Industrial relocation. As if moving 8 billion people off a planet was comparable to reorganizing a factory. We formally request dialogue regarding humanity's application for full membership status in the Galactic Concordat. We believe our technological capabilities, territorial holdings, and population distribution now qualify us for immediate membership consideration as equals among the galactic community. The transmission paused as if allowing time for the words to sink in. Thexvara used that pause to pull up the data they had on human capabilities. Everything in their files suggested a species barely capable of rudimentary space travel. Everything on her display suggested a civilization that had been lying about their capabilities for at least a century. Admiral Thexvara of the Concordat Defense Fleet. She kept her voice steady through force of will alone. We request clarification of your statements. Our records indicate humanity possesses limited space capabilities and no colonial holdings beyond Earth. The response came immediately, as if Dr. Alara Thorne had been expecting exactly that question. Admiral, with respect, your records are incomplete. Humanity has maintained colonial installations throughout this region of space for over 60 years. Our decision to limit communications from Earth was part of a planned transition to a distributed civilization model. The appearance of primitive status, Bumity, was strategic necessity, not technological limitation. You're saying your entire species has been living in secret colonies this entire time. Not the entire species, Admiral. Approximately 8 billion humans remained on Earth to maintain the appearance of a single-world civilization, while the majority of our population, approximately 20 billion individuals, established settlements on 3,000 worlds within a radius of 500 light-years from Sol. 20 billion, 3,000 worlds, maintained in secret for 60 years while the Concordat watched Earth and saw exactly what the humans wanted them to see. Dr. Thorne, Thexvara said carefully, why did you choose to reveal yourselves now? Because our development phase is complete, Admiral. We no longer require the protection that concealment provided. We are ready to participate as equals in galactic civilization. And we believe transparency is important for building trust between our civilizations. Trust. From a species that had lied about their capabilities for generations. But looking at the display at 500,000 ships organized in perfect military formations, Thexvara understood the real message. The humans weren't asking permission. They were stating fact. And they'd arranged 500,000 reasons why the Concordat should listen carefully to what they had to say. Dr. Thorne, the Concordat accepts your invitation for dialogue. However, we must ask, how long have you possessed these capabilities? The pause before the answer felt deliberate, as if Dr. Thorne was choosing her words with surgical precision. Our space-based civilization has been developing for over a century, Admiral. Our decision to appear primitive was based on historical analysis of how advanced species typically respond to rapidly developing neighbors. We chose caution over confrontation, patience over presence, strategic deception over vulnerable honesty. And the installations throughout the galaxy, the monitoring we've detected, humanity has established infrastructure to support our colonial holdings. We apologize for any concern our operations may have caused. Please understand that maintaining operational security was essential during our development phase. Now that we're ready to reveal ourselves, we look forward to open cooperation with all Concordat members. The transmission ended, leaving Thexvara staring at a display showing the largest fleet in known space commanded by a species that had successfully deceived every intelligence service in the galaxy for over a century. Medane spoke quietly. Admiral, if their claims are accurate, humanity may now be the largest single civilization in known space, in terms of population, territorial holdings, and apparently military capability. Thexvara nodded slowly, watching the human fleet maintain perfect formations around her comparatively tiny force. 30 Concordat dreadnoughts facing 500,000 human warships. The humans could destroy her fleet in minutes, but they'd ask politely for dialogue instead. That politeness, that restraint from a position of overwhelming strength was somehow more terrifying than aggression would have been. Send a message to Concordat Command, she ordered. Priority Alpha classification, message content. The humans have revealed themselves. We were wrong about everything, and we need to convene the full Galactic Assembly immediately because the balance of power in known space just changed completely. But before the message could be transmitted, Medane called out urgently, Admiral, the human fleet is moving. Admiral, they're intercepting something. The tactical display updated. A raider fleet, 200 ships bearing the signatures of the same group that had attacked Kepler 442b, had been approaching the system. probably planning to scavenge whatever they thought had destroyed human civilization. They were about to learn a very different lesson. 240 human ships peeled away from the main formation with fluid precision. The raiders saw them coming and began evasive maneuvers, but it was like watching children run from tigers. The human vessels moved with surgical precision. Energy shields absorbed incoming fire and somehow redirected it back at the attackers. Gravity weapons pulled raider ships out of formation without destroying them. Precision strikes disabled engines and weapons without breaching hulls. 4 hours. The battle lasted exactly 4 hours. When it ended, 120 raider ships had been destroyed, most by their own redirected fire. 80 had been disabled and captured, their crews extracted and placed in containment fields. Human casualties, 0. Not a single ship damaged, not one human injured. "How is that possible?" Medane whispered. The answer came in the form of a transmission. The same calm voice from earlier. "Admiral Thexvara, we've secured the raider forces. Medical teams are treating their wounded. We'll transfer prisoners to Concordat custody when you're ready." These are the same raiders who attacked Kepler 442b last year. "We believe you'll find their capture satisfying." There was the slightest edge in that last word. Not quite anger, not quite satisfaction. Something colder and more controlled. "You've only seen what we wanted you to see, Admiral," the voice added quietly. "We've been ready for this conversation for quite some time. We were simply waiting for the right moment to have it." The transmission ended. Thexvara stared at the tactical display. The human fleet was already repositioning, forming up around Jupiter again. As if a battle that demonstrated combat capability, that rewrote every tactical manual in Concordat space, had been a minor inconvenience rather than a statement of overwhelming superiority. Medane found her voice. "Admiral, we need to reconsider every assessment we've ever made about human capabilities." "Yes," Thexvara said quietly. "We do. And I think we need to do it very, very quickly." As the message was prepared and transmitted, Thexvara looked out at the human fleet and realized that humanity had just taught the galaxy a lesson it wouldn't forget. The most dangerous assumption in existence was thinking you knew what your neighbors were truly capable of doing. And the galaxy had just learned that lesson the hard way. The Galactic Assembly Hall had witnessed 40,000 years of history. Wars declared and peace negotiated. Species welcomed and alliances forged. The great debates that shaped civilizations and the quiet compromises that prevented their destruction. But it had never witnessed anything like this. 37 species filled the massive chamber, representatives from every corner of Concordat space. The Zithians, with their elongated craniums and contemplative demeanor. The Thoraxians, whose carapaces reflected light in patterns that spoke of emotion. The Andorians, who existed partially in dimensions other species could barely perceive. The Crystalline Collective, whose very thoughts created harmonic frequencies in the surrounding air. All gathered to address what the emergency session protocols called the human question. Council Speaker Velnara, whose silver threading marked her as elder among the Zithians, called the assembly to order. At 68 years old, she had led the Concordat for 12 years through disputes and discoveries, always maintaining the careful balance that kept 37 species working together instead of tearing each other apart. She had never felt the weight of that responsibility more acutely than in this moment. "We gather today," she announced, her voice carrying across the chamber through translation systems that rendered her words in 37 languages simultaneously, to address the formal application for membership submitted by the Human Colonial Administration. Dr. Alara Thorne, Ambassador for Humanity, will present their case. The doors opened. Dr. Alara Thorne walked into the chamber alone, and somehow that made her presence more commanding rather than less. She wore a simple blue diplomatic uniform, bearing no decorations save a small pin showing Earth and its moon, the planet everyone had thought was humanity's only home, and the silver rock humans had supposedly struggled to reach. The irony was not lost on anyone in the chamber. At 58 years old, Alara's silver hair and the lines around her eyes spoke of experience earned rather than time merely endured. She moved with the precise economy of someone who had spent a lifetime learning that every action, every word, every gesture carried weight and consequence. Her blue eyes swept across the assembly with a gaze that assessed and cataloged, missing nothing. She walked to the central speaking platform like she owned it. No hesitation, no deference, just the calm certainty of someone who knew exactly what they were and exactly what they represented. 500,000 warships and 20 billion humans who had successfully deceived every intelligence service in the galaxy for a century. Honored members of the Galactic Concordat, she began, her voice clear and precise, carrying the kind of authority that made listeners lean forward rather than settle back. I am Dr. Alara Thorne, speaking on behalf of approximately 20 billion human beings living throughout this region of space. A murmur rippled through the assembly. 20 billion. The number was staggering. The Zithian Empire, oldest and most established of the Concordat members, had 15 billion citizens spread across 200 worlds built over 6,000 years. Humanity apparently had 20 billion across 3,000 worlds built in barely a century. I understand, Alara continued, that humanity's revelation has been surprising to many of you. For the past 100 years, we have maintained the appearance of a primitive single-world civilization while secretly developing into something considerably larger. Today, I will explain why we made this choice, what it means for our future relationship with the Concordat, and what we bring to the galactic community as potential equals. Representative Gekkari of the Thraxian Empire was first to speak, his voice carrying the resonance his species used to convey both question and challenge. Ambassador Thorne, the Concordat monitored your species for over 40 years. We watched Earth constantly. How did you hide such massive development from our sensors? Alara's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested she'd been waiting for exactly this question. Representative Gekkari, that is an excellent question. The answer lies in understanding what you were actually watching. She activated a holographic display that materialized above the central platform. It showed Earth as the Concordat had observed its city's lights, radio signals, the constant electromagnetic chatter of industrial civilization. You were watching Earth, a single planet, 8 billion humans living what appeared to be typical lives for a developing species, fighting wars, building cities, broadcasting into space with the enthusiasm of a species that hadn't yet learned caution. The display shifted, showing deeper analysis. But Earth was never our only home. It was our theater, our stage, the performance we maintained for your benefit while the real work happened elsewhere. The display expanded, showing star systems spreading outward from Sol in an expanding sphere. Hundreds of systems, thousands of worlds, each one marked with human presence. When we first detected Concordat monitoring stations observing Earth, Alara said, her tone matter-of-fact, educational. Our leadership faced a critical decision. We could develop openly and risk being conquered or controlled by more advanced species who might view our rapid progress as threatening. Or we could develop in secret while maintaining the appearance of a primitive civilization. She paused, letting the implications sink in. We chose survival. We chose to show you what you expected to see while becoming something you couldn't imagine we were capable of becoming. The holographic display shifted again, showing the progression of human expansion. Small outposts in uninhabited systems. Larger installations hidden within asteroid fields. Entire cities constructed in the empty spaces between stars where no one thought to look because no one believed humans could reach that far. We began with hidden mining operations disguised as natural formations. Those supported manufacturing facilities built inside hollow moons, which in turn supported full colonial settlements established on worlds the Concordat had surveyed and dismissed as uninteresting. Within 50 years, we had established a completely separate civilization that existed alongside our Earth-based society. Representative Morkala of the Andorian Federation raised the question others were thinking. How did you coordinate such massive projects across interstellar distances? Even the most advanced Concordat members cannot maintain real-time communication across such vast areas. Alara smiled, and there was something almost apologetic in that expression. Almost. Representative Morkala, that question touches on one of humanity's most significant achievements. We developed quantum entanglement communication networks that allow instantaneous contact across any distance. The technology took 40 years to perfect, but once operational, it allowed us to coordinate our colonial empire as efficiently as if all our worlds existed in the same star system. The assembly erupted. Instantaneous interstellar communication was considered theoretically impossible by Concordat physics. The fastest communication method available to the most advanced species required routing signals through hyperspace, which still took days or weeks depending on distance. Humans apparently had solved what the galaxy's greatest minds considered unsolvable. Furthermore, Alara continued once the noise subsided, our manufacturing capabilities are based on self-replicating automated systems that can construct new installations from raw materials with minimal human supervision. This allowed us to expand exponentially rather than linearly. One facility could build two could build four could build 8. Within decades, we had construction capacity that rivaled the entire Concordat combined. She activated another display showing real-time feeds from hundreds of locations, bustling cities on distant planets Their architecture, unmistakably human, but built on a scale that suggested confidence rather than survival. Massive space stations orbiting stars the Concordat had never bothered to catalog. Fleets of spacecraft moving between systems with the casual frequency of trains on a schedule. These are live feeds from human settlements throughout a 500 light-year radius from Earth. As you can see, human civilization is both extensive and highly developed. We are not asking for membership from a position of need or weakness. We are requesting recognition as equals who have earned their place through capability and achievement. Representative Helnath of the Crystalline Collective raised a concern that resonated in harmonic frequencies. The translation system struggled to parse. When the meaning came through, it carried the weight of crystallized skepticism. Ambassador Thorne, why should the Concordat trust a species that has been deliberately deceiving us for decades? Your entire relationship with us has been built on lies. What basis for trust can possibly exist? Alara's expression became more serious. This was the question that mattered, the one that would determine whether humanity entered the Concordat as partners or remained outsiders despite their strength. Representative Helnath, I understand your concern, but consider this carefully. She deactivated the displays, leaving just herself on the platform, one human facing 37 species who had every reason to be angry about being deceived. History teaches us what happens to weak species when they encounter stronger civilizations. Sometimes the strong are benevolent, sometimes they are merely indifferent, sometimes they are actively predatory. But in all cases, the weak have no choice in how they are treated. They accept what the strong decide to give them, or they cease to exist. She let that truth settle before continuing. 40 years ago, I was 18 years old, a student, daughter of two scientists who believed in exploration and discovery and the fundamental goodness of reaching toward the unknown. They were aboard a colony transport heading to establish a research outpost in a system the Concordat had marked as uninhabited. Alara's voice remained steady, but something cold had entered it, something that made even the oldest beings in the chamber pay closer attention. A Concordat observation team detected the transport, misidentified it as a military vessel, destroyed it. 3,000 people died in an instant, including my mother and father. I was 18 years old and I watched the official report classify their deaths as a regrettable accident. Acceptable losses due to primitive species unpredictability. No one was held accountable. No compensation was offered. No apology was given beyond the formal minimum required by protocol. The chamber had gone completely silent. This wasn't abstract diplomatic posturing. This was personal. And everyone present understood that personal grievances from someone commanding 500,000 warships carried weight that academic arguments never could. So yes, Representative Helnath, we lied. We deceived you, we pretended to be weak while becoming strong. We did this because the alternative, trusting in the benevolence of stronger civilizations, had already cost 3,000 human lives and taught us exactly how much that trust was worth. She looked around the chamber, meeting eyes with representatives from species who had watched humanity struggle and had chosen to do nothing more than observe. We chose to become strong in secret rather than remain weak in the open. We chose deception over vulnerable honesty. And yes, that was a choice built on the assumption that we couldn't trust you to treat us fairly if you knew how quickly we were developing. Alara's voice softened slightly but lost none of its intensity. Now we are strong. Now we possess capabilities that make us impossible to ignore or dismiss. Now we can negotiate from a position where trust becomes mutual necessity rather than naive hope. That is why we reveal ourselves now, not because we suddenly trust you more, but because we're finally strong enough that it doesn't matter whether you deserve trust or not. The silence that followed felt like pressure, like the moment before a storm breaks. Chief Diplomatic Officer Turvana of the Concordat Council spoke, carefully aware that every word was being recorded for historical analysis by civilizations that wouldn't exist for millennia. Ambassador Thorne, what does humanity want from Concordat membership? The same thing every species wants, Officer Turvana. Security for our people, trade opportunities to share resources and knowledge, peaceful coexistence with our neighbors, and most importantly, recognition that we have earned the right to determine our own destiny without external interference or control. And what do you offer in return? Alara smiled again, and this time it reached her eyes. We offer advanced technologies that could benefit all Concordat members. Quantum communication systems, self-replicating manufacturing, stealth capabilities that apparently work quite well. We offer extensive resources from 3,000 worlds that could support Concordat trade networks. We offer a new perspective on galactic development, proof that it's possible for a species to advance rapidly while avoiding attention from potentially hostile neighbors. She paused, making sure everyone understood the weight of her next words. And we offer a demonstration of what restraint looks like when exercised by choice rather than necessity. Meaning, prompted Turvana. Meaning, officer, that we have spent the last year watching Concordat forces investigate our disappearance, monitor our installations, and try to understand what we built. At any point during that year, we could have revealed ourselves through aggression. We could have demonstrated our capabilities by destroying your monitoring stations or capturing your investigation teams. We possessed overwhelming military superiority and complete surprise. In military terms, we held every possible advantage. Alara's voice took on an edge that made clear this wasn't academic speculation. Instead, we said please and thank you. We politely asked your ships to maintain safe distances. We allowed your investigations to proceed unimpeded. We gave you time to discover the truth gradually, rather than all at once in a moment of violent revelation. That restraint, that choice to reveal strength through patience rather than aggression, that is what we offer the Concordat. You're saying we should be grateful you didn't attack us? Representative Getkari's tone suggested offense. I'm saying you should recognize that choosing patience over violence, when violence would have been easier, demonstrates civilization. Any species can build weapons. We built weapons and chose not to use them despite having every strategic advantage. That choice is what separates a civilization from a military power. Representative Quelthara of the Mystic Enclave asked the question that cut to the heart of everything. Ambassador Thorne, are there other species following humanity's example? Other civilizations developing in secret? Alara's expression shifted, becoming something that might have been satisfaction or might have been anticipation of dropping another revelation onto an assembly that was already struggling to process the impossible. Representative Quelthara, that is perhaps the most important question you could ask. Yes, there are others. The assembly fell silent again, but this time the silence carried a different quality. Not shock, not anger, something closer to dawning horror as the implications became clear. The galaxy contains many quiet watchers, patient builders, careful planners who learned the same lesson humanity learned, that appearing weak can be safer than revealing strength prematurely. Humanity is not unique in choosing strategic deception over vulnerable honesty. We are simply the first to decide we're ready to reveal ourselves openly. Ilara activated one final holographic display, a star map showing hundreds of systems marked in different colors spread across 1,000 light-years of space. These systems contain civilizations that appear primitive to outside observers, but possess capabilities far beyond what they display publicly. Some are more advanced than humanity, others are just beginning their hidden development phases. Some have been building in secret for centuries, others for mere decades. How do you know this? Demanded Representative Morkalong. Because we've been in contact with them for years, Representative. There is an informal network of developing civilizations that share information and resources while maintaining the appearance of primitive societies. We communicate, we trade, we warn each other when concordant attention becomes too focused. We help each other stay hidden until we're ready to reveal ourselves. The implications were staggering. The Concordat had assumed they were monitoring and protecting primitive species. But many of those species were actually advanced civilizations choosing to remain hidden, sharing intelligence about their observers, collectively playing the Concordat for fools. Humanity is simply the first to emerge openly, Ilara said quietly. We won't be the last. Within the next century, I predict at least a dozen more civilizations will reveal themselves similarly. Each one will demonstrate that the galaxy is far more complex and populated than the Concordat realized. Each one will prove that apparent weakness should never be mistaken for actual weakness. She deactivated the display, leaving just herself on the platform once again. So that is what humanity offers the Concordat: advanced technology, extensive resources, a new understanding of galactic development, and perhaps most valuable, a warning. The universe is full of civilizations you don't know about, building capabilities you haven't detected, waiting for the moment when revealing themselves serves their strategic interest. Ilara's voice took on a tone of finality. The age of assuming you understand what your neighbors are capable of is over. The age of underestimating the quiet ones has ended. Humanity emerges as the first, but we won't be unique for long. How the Concordat responds to us will determine how those others choose to reveal themselves. Through cooperation as we offer now, or through confrontation if you make that the only path available. Is that a threat? asked Gakari. It's a statement of reality, representative. We're not threatening anyone, we're explaining how the galaxy actually works, as opposed to how the Concordat thought it worked. What you do with that information is your choice. But understand that your response to humanity's emergence will be observed by dozens of civilizations who are deciding whether cooperation with the Concordat is worth abandoning their strategic concealment. Council Speaker Velnara called for a recess while representatives discussed this revelation. The assembly dissolved into intense conversations, species grouping together to debate the implications of a galaxy suddenly full of hidden civilizations waiting to reveal themselves. Alara stood on the platform alone, surrounded by the arguments her words had provoked. She looked calm, patient, like someone who had said everything that needed saying and was content to wait for others to reach the conclusions she'd already arrived at years ago. When the session resumed 3 hours later, Velnara's expression had settled into the careful neutrality of someone making a decision they knew would be analyzed by historians for millennia. Ambassador Thorne, the Galactic Concordat, votes to grant humanity full membership status with all rights and responsibilities thereof. We also formally request that humanity share information about other hidden civilizations to help us adjust our policies and protocols accordingly. Alara stood and bowed respectfully, the gesture carrying precisely calibrated acknowledgement without subordination. The Human Colonial Administration accepts membership in the Galactic Concordat. We look forward to working together as partners and equals. Regarding other civilizations, we will share what information we ethically can, but understand that some species have trusted humanity with their secrets on the condition of confidentiality. We won't betray that trust even for Concordat membership. However, we will facilitate introductions when and if those civilizations decide they're ready to reveal themselves. It was a measured refusal delivered with enough diplomatic padding to soften the rejection, but firm enough to make clear humanity wouldn't be dictated to even by the organization they were joining. Velnara nodded slowly, recognizing the implicit message. Humanity was joining as equals, not as supplicants. They would cooperate, but not obey. They would share, but not submit. The Concordat accepts these terms, Velnara said, and in those words, the balance of galactic power shifted permanently. But Alara wasn't finished. She had one more revelation to deliver, one more lesson to teach about what humanity had become during their century of hidden development. There is one more thing the Concordat should know, she said quietly, about the weapons we possess and the choices we've made regarding their use. She activated the holographic display one final time. 7 points appeared on the star map scattered throughout the galaxy, each one pulsing with indicators that suggested massive power signatures. These, Alara said, her voice carrying the weight of confession and warning in equal measure, are Helios-class stellar destabilization platforms. Each one is approximately 30 kilometers in diameter. Each one is capable of triggering catastrophic collapse in any star within a range of 50 light-years. The assembly fell silent. Not the silence of shock this time, the silence of species collectively realizing they were being told about weapons capable of destroying entire star systems. Each platform can destabilize a star's fusion cycle, causing it to expand rapidly or collapse catastrophically depending on the star's mass and composition. The process takes approximately 48 hours once initiated and is irreversible after the first 12 hours. Everything within that star's habitable zone is destroyed. Planets, stations, ships, everything. She let that information settle like fallout. We built 7 of these platforms over the past 23 years. They have been operational and undetected for 2 decades. Each one is positioned to cover major Concordat population centers. Between the 7 platforms, we have theoretical capability to destroy approximately 70% of all Concordat inhabited systems. The chamber erupted. Accusations of aggression, demands for immediate deactivation, calls for military response. 37 species trying to process the information that humanity had secretly built weapons capable of committing genocide on a galactic scale. Velnara called for order repeatedly before the noise subsided enough for Alara to continue. We built them, Alara said, her voice cutting through the remaining tumult, to ensure that if we revealed ourselves and the Concordat responded with aggression, we would possess absolute deterrence, mutually assured destruction on a scale that would make military conflict pointless. She paused, making eye contact with representatives across the chamber. And in 23 years of operational status, we have never activated one. Not once. Not even for testing beyond computer simulations. The silence returned, but different now, confused, trying to understand why she would admit to building such weapons if she'd never intended to use them. Let me demonstrate something, Alara said. She activated controls and one of the 7 points on the display began to pulse more rapidly. That signal indicates a Helios platform activating its targeting sequence. Right now, it's calculating the precise intervention points to destabilize the star system you're looking at. She let the platform continue its calculations for 30 seconds while the assembly watched in frozen horror. Then she deactivated it. And now it's powered down. Targeting sequence aborted. The star system continues existing because we chose not to destroy it. Alara looked around the chamber, meeting eyes with every representative who would hold her gaze. We could destroy you all, right now, this moment. 7 platforms targeting 7 key systems. Within 2 days, 70% of Concordat space would be burning. Within 2 weeks, the cascade effects would collapse galactic civilization entirely. We have had this capability for over 20 years, and we have chosen every single day for 20 years not to use it. Her voice carried absolute conviction. That is civilization representatives, not the building of weapons. Any species with sufficient technology can build weapons. Civilization is building weapons capable of destroying everything and choosing not to use them. Civilization is possessing absolute power and exercising absolute restraint. Representative Helnath spoke his crystalline voice carrying harmonics of genuine confusion. Then why build them at all if you never intended to use them? Because we needed to prove something, to ourselves and to you. Alara's expression softened slightly. We needed to prove that humanity had learned from 10,000 years of killing each other, that we had evolved beyond seeing power as something that must be exercised to be real, that we understood the difference between strength and tyranny. She gestured at the display, at the 7 platforms capable of ending civilizations. We built these to demonstrate we could. Then we chose not to use them to demonstrate we've learned wisdom. Any fool with resources can build weapons of mass destruction. True civilization is building those weapons and then having the wisdom and restraint to never use them unless every other option has failed. That, she said quietly, is what humanity offers the Concordat. Not just our technology or resources or military capability. We offer proof that a species can learn restraint, can build weapons of ultimate destruction and choose peace anyway, can possess the means to conquer and choose partnership instead. She deactivated the display, leaving the chamber in silence. We are not asking the Concordat to trust that we won't use these weapons. We're demonstrating that we've already chosen not to use them despite having every strategic advantage. For 20 years, we could have announced ourselves through violence. For 20 years, we chose patience instead. That choice, that sustained, deliberate choice to reveal ourselves through cooperation rather than conquest, that separates civilization from barbarism. Council Speaker Velnara spoke carefully, aware that her words would be dissected by analysts for generations. Ambassador Thorne, will humanity agree to deactivate these platforms as a condition of Concordat membership? No, the word hung in the air like a blade. We will agree to mutual verification protocols. We will agree to joint oversight committees. We will agree to every transparency measure the Concordat wishes to implement. But we will not disarm unilaterally while other species maintain their own weapons. We will not return to being weak just because being strong makes others uncomfortable. Alara's tone remained respectful but inflexible. We built the Helios platforms to ensure our survival in a galaxy that proved it would let humans die, rather than inconvenience themselves with our protection. 1 year ago, 40,000 humans died on Kepler 442b. Raiders attacked our colony. The Concordat voted on Article 12 mutual defense. The vote failed by 1. 40,000 humans burned while you debated protocols. Her voice carried grief transformed into steel. Among those 40,000 was Dr. Miranda Halstead, 29 years old, geneticist, my protege, Ambassador Sterling's niece. She died screaming for help that never came because the Concordat chose political convenience over moral obligation. Alara looked directly at Velnara. So no council speaker, we will not disarm. We will maintain every defensive capability we possess until we are convinced beyond doubt that the Concordat would actually protect us if we needed it. When you demonstrate that human lives matter as much as any other Concordat species, when you prove that Article 12 means something more than political theater, then perhaps we'll discuss reducing our defensive posture. Until then, we'll keep our weapons, and we'll continue choosing not to use them. And that choice maintained every day is the strongest guarantee of peace we can offer you. The vote had been taken. Humanity was now a Concordat member. But everyone in the chamber understood that the relationship would be different from any other membership in Concordat history. Humanity wasn't joining as a junior partner to be guided and protected. They were joining as equals who had earned their position through capability and had demonstrated restraint from a position of overwhelming strength. They were joining as the species that had successfully hidden for a century built weapons capable of ending civilizations and chosen peace anyway. That combination of power and restraint would change how every species in the galaxy thought about humanity. And through humanity, how they thought about all the other quiet civilizations waiting in the shadows building their own capabilities, watching to see if cooperation or confrontation served their interests better. 10 years passed. Earth had come alive again, billions of humans returning from their colonial homes to rebuild the world that had birthed them. But it was different now. Earth served as humanity's administrative and cultural center, but it was no longer humanity's only home. It was one world among 3,000 special for what it represented, rather than for being irreplaceable. The skyline of every major city had changed. Towers reached higher built with materials and techniques that had been refined across 3,000 worlds. Transportation networks connected cities through tunnels that bent space-making travel from New York to Tokyo take less time than it once took to cross Manhattan. And everywhere, always the quiet hum of quantum communication networks connecting Earth to the rest of humanity's empire. Dr. Elara Thorne, now 68 years old, stood in front of a memorial wall at what had once been the United Nations building in New York. The wall was simple, elegant, carved from asteroid stone, brought back from Kepler 442b, after humanity had claimed the system and rebuilt what the raiders had destroyed. 40,000 names were carved into that stone. 40,000 humans who had died because the Concordat chose convenience over justice. Near the center of the wall, one name was highlighted in gold: Dr. Miranda Halstead, age 29, geneticist. Still visiting her. Elara didn't turn at the voice. She knew it too well. Ambassador Thaddeus Sterling, now 77 years old, had officially retired for the third time, and this time he claimed to mean it. Every year on the anniversary, Elara replied. Seems appropriate. She died so we could prove a point. She died because raiders are murderers and the Concordat was cowardly. That's not the same as dying to prove a point. Isn't it her death was what convinced the Council to authorize Phase 1? Without Kepler 442b, we might have stayed hidden another decade. Might have missed our moment. She died and 40,000 died with her, and their deaths created the catalyst we needed. Sterling moved to stand beside her, looking at the wall of names. You're allowed to mourn them without turning their deaths into strategic necessity, Elara. I do mourn them, every day. But I also recognize that their deaths bought something valuable. The galaxy's attention, the Concordat's respect. Proof that humanity would not be ignored or dismissed anymore. 40,000 lives is a hell of a price for respect. Yes, Elara said softly. It is, which is why we built the Helios platforms and chose never to use them. Why we revealed ourselves through patience rather than violence. Why we helped species that once would have been our enemies. Because 40,000 people taught us exactly what the cost of weakness looks like, and we decided never to pay that price again. Sterling nodded slowly. I heard the Vraxian Confederation asked for our help last month. The same raiders that hit Kepler 442b. They did. We sent a fleet, arrived in 2 days. The raiders took one look at our ships and surrendered without firing a shot. We're helping them relocate to a supervised rehabilitation system, teaching them that peaceful trade is more profitable than piracy. You're rebuilding your enemies. I'm proving that strength with wisdom is more effective than strength with revenge. The raiders who killed Miranda are now learning productive skills under human supervision. In 20 years, they'll be contributing members of the galactic community. That honors her memory better than killing them ever could. Sterling smiled. Your parents would be so proud of what you built, Elara, and so terrified of what you became. I became what I needed to be. Someone strong enough to make sure humans never play the victim again. Someone wise enough to know that strength without restraint just creates more victims. They stood in silence looking at the memorial, while around them, New York City hummed with life. Humans and aliens walking together now. Concordat representatives visiting Earth as diplomatic equals, rather than superior observers. Trade ships from a dozen species landing at spaceports that had been hidden for a century and were now the busiest in known space. New mission briefing in an hour, Sterling said eventually. Another distress call. Species called the Morthrin getting pushed around by a larger neighbor, asking if humanity can help. And we will, Elara replied, because that's what Guardians do. We help those who can't help themselves. We stop aggression. We protect the innocent. And we ask nothing in return except the knowledge that we're making the galaxy slightly less terrible than we found it. You ever regret it? The deception, the lies, the century of playing primitive while building an empire? Alara considered the question seriously. Every day. But I regret my parents' death more. I regret Miranda's death more. I regret every human who died because we were weak and the strong didn't care. Those regrets outweigh the guilt of deception. Good answer, Sterling said. An hour later, Dr. Ilara Thorne stood before 3,000 young humans who had volunteered to become guardians. They came from worlds across humanity's empire, but they all shared the same determination she had seen in the mirror for 50 years. The determination to make sure humanity never played the victim again. You all know why you're here, she began. You've heard about Kepler 442b, about the 40,000 who died while the galaxy debated protocols, about Miranda Halstead and what her death meant for humanity's emergence. You've heard the stories about how we hid, how we built, how we revealed ourselves from a position of absolute strength. 3,000 young faces looked back at her with varying expressions: eagerness, determination, fear, hope. All the emotions she remembered from her own youth before her parents died and taught her the cost of weakness. But today I'm not going to tell you stories about our strength. Today I'm going to tell you about our restraint. She activated a holographic display showing the 7 Helios platforms. These weapons can destroy civilizations. We built them to ensure our survival. And in 23 years we have never used them. Not once. Not even when we had justification and overwhelming advantage. We chose restraint over revenge, patience over punishment, wisdom over wrath. Ilara looked across the assembled recruits. That choice, that daily sustained choice to possess ultimate power and exercise ultimate restraint, that is what being a guardian means. It means having the strength to destroy and the wisdom to protect instead. It means facing situations where violence would be easier and choosing the harder path of peace. It means remembering that the goal isn't to prove we're strong. The goal is to make sure others don't suffer because they're weak. She thought of her parents, of Miranda, of 40,000 names carved in stone. The galaxy is full of species that can destroy. That's easy. Any civilization with sufficient technology can build weapons of mass destruction. But civilization isn't measured by what you can destroy. It's measured by what you choose not to destroy. By the restraint you exercise when you have every advantage and no one can stop you from doing whatever you want. She gestured to the Helios platforms on the display. These weapons prove we could end civilizations. Our choice not to use them proves we're a civilization worth preserving. Remember that. Every mission you fly, every conflict you face, every moment when destruction seems easier than diplomacy. Remember that your strength is meaningless without wisdom to guide it. Real power, Ilara said, her voice carrying across the silent assembly, isn't the ability to destroy. Real power is the wisdom to know when not to destroy, the restraint to choose mercy when you could choose vengeance, the courage to help your enemies become better rather than simply eliminating them. 3,000 young guardians in training sat in silence, absorbing the lesson. Understanding that being a guardian wasn't about strength alone. It was about strength tempered with wisdom, power guided by compassion, capability restrained by conscience. Later that night, Ilara stood in her office overlooking New York City, watching lights twinkle across a world reborn. Her communicator chimed, the distress call from the Morthrin, another species asking humanity for help against a stronger neighbor. She could ignore it, could let someone else respond, could finally, after 50 years of carrying the burden, let the younger generation take over. But she didn't. Because guardians don't rest when others need them. Because the choice to help rather than ignore is what separated humanity from the Concordat that had watched her parents die and called it an acceptable accident. Prepare my ship, she said to her aide. Plot course to the Morthrin system. Estimated arrival. 36 hours at quantum speed, Ambassador. Good. That gives them time to hope and gives us time to prepare. Send a message ahead. Humanity is coming. Stand fast. We don't abandon those who ask for help. As her ship prepared for departure, Ilara looked one more time at the data showing humanity's place in the galaxy. 3,000 worlds, 20 billion people, nearly 500,000 warships, 7 stellar destabilization platforms that had never fired and never would unless every other option failed first. And somewhere out there, dozens of other civilizations still hiding, still watching, still deciding whether humanity's example was worth following. The choice she had made 50 years ago to reveal humanity's strength through patience rather than violence was still echoing through the galaxy. still teaching lessons, still proving that real power came not from capability but from restraint. That choice would continue echoing for generations, for centuries. For as long as humanity existed and remembered that they had possessed the means to conquer everything and had chosen to protect everything instead. Ambassador, her pilot's voice came through. We're ready for departure. Then let's go, Alara Thorne said. Someone needs help, and we promised we'd answer when they called. That promise is what makes us guardians instead of just another military power. The ship rose into the night sky, quantum drives bending space and probability. Behind her, Earth spun in peaceful orbit, a world reborn from silence into sound. Around her, 3,000 worlds held their breath, wondering what challenge would come next. And ahead of her, somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, another species waited for proof that strength could be tempered with compassion, that power could be exercised with restraint, that the strong could choose to protect the weak instead of exploiting them. Humanity had made that choice. Every day for 10 years, they had made that choice. And every time they made it, the echoes spread a little further, teaching the galaxy one encounter at a time that real civilization wasn't measured by what you could destroy. It was measured by what you chose not to destroy when you had every reason and every ability to do so. That choice, that simple, profound choice, would echo through eternity.